The cell was dark, damp, and smelled of rusted chains and old blood. She had forgotten the shape of the sun, forgotten how the wind felt on her skin, forgotten even the sound of her own laughter. For 13 years she had lived in this stone hole, under the cruel rule of the alien Baron. Time moved in strange ways here. Sometimes days felt like hours, sometimes hours like years. The only thing she could measure was the thin line of pale light that slipped through a crack in the ceiling each morning and faded away at night. That small light was her clock, her only reminder that a world outside still existed. Her body carried the scars of endless punishment. Her wrists were raw, where the iron shackles rubbed against them every day, her back covered with marks of the whip. The Baron enjoyed breaking her slowly. He never wanted her dead. Death would be a release, and he wanted her to live and suffer, to remember she belonged to him. Many times she had begged for the end, but his cold laughter had been the only reply. He wanted her to remain a toy, a prisoner who could never escape. At first, when she was newly captured, she had screamed for help, shouted until her throat burned. She had sworn revenge, had sworn she would never kneel. But as the years dragged on, her voice grew weaker, her body grew thinner. Hope turned to dust. She learned silence. Silence was her shield. Silence was survival. If she remained quiet, perhaps the guards would forget her for a while. Perhaps the Baron would ignore her. Yet inside, beneath that silence, a fire still lived. She remembered her old life, though the memories were faint, like fading pictures in smoke. She had once been free, running across green fields, her hair flying in the wind. She had a family, a clan, a home. But the Baron's soldiers had taken all of it. They had burned her village. They had killed everyone she loved. She had been dragged away in chains, screaming, while the flames swallowed her past. That image never left her. Each night when she closed her eyes, she saw the fire, and she smelled the smoke. Sometimes she thought she was losing her mind. She talked to the walls, whispered to the rats, counted cracks in the stones again and again. 13 years was long enough to erase the meaning of freedom, long enough to break anyone. But not her. Deep inside, in the hidden corner of her heart, she told herself one thing: survive. As long as she breathed, there was a chance, even if it was small, even if it was a dream. The Baron came to visit her often. He liked to remind her that she was his prize. His steps echoed through the corridors before he appeared, tall and cruel, his shadow falling over her. He would speak in a voice soft as poison, telling her she was nothing, telling her no one would save her. Sometimes he brought guests, other alien lords, showing her off like an animal in a cage. They laughed, pointing at her broken body, at the girl who once dared to fight him. Each laugh was a knife in her chest, but she never gave him tears. She looked at him with empty eyes, refusing to let him see the last spark of her soul. The guards were worse. They treated her like less than dirt, shoving her, starving her, mocking her hunger. They gave her rotten food, sometimes nothing at all. She learned to eat bugs, to drink dirty water dripping from the ceiling. Hunger was her constant companion. Her stomach twisted with pain every night, but she held on. She told herself, if she could live one more day, maybe tomorrow something would change. Her body grew thin, her bones sharp under her skin. Her once bright eyes dulled. Her hair fell in messy strands. She was not the girl she once had been, but the fire, though faint, still flickered. She never let it die. Each morning, when the crack of light returned, she whispered a single word to herself: escape. She did not know how, she did not know when, but she repeated it like a prayer. Some nights, she dreamed of freedom. In her dreams, she ran again across the green fields of her memory. She felt rain on her face. She smelled flowers. She heard laughter of voices long gone. When she woke, her cheeks were wet with tears. She pressed her hands to the cold stone floor and reminded herself that dreams could not feed her, but they could keep her alive. 13 years of torture carved her into steel. She no longer screamed when they beat her. She no longer begged when they starved her. She endured. She waited. She listened. She learned the footsteps of every guard, the sound of every lock. She knew the schedules, the routines, the weak points. They thought she was broken, but she was watching, always watching. One evening, when the Baron came, he was careless. He spoke too loudly with his captain. She heard them talk of a gathering, a feast, where the Baron and his best soldiers would leave the fortress for one night. Her heart raced, pounding harder than it had in years. She kept her face calm, eyes down, but inside the word echoed louder than ever: escape. That night, when the thin line of moonlight cut across the floor of her cell, she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, 13 years, no more. She pulled at her chains until her wrists bled, testing the old iron, praying it would break. The fire in her chest, the one she had hidden for so long, roared to life. For the first time in 13 years, she did not feel like a prisoner. She felt like a survivor preparing for her chance, and when it came, she would not hesitate. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that bit into her skin and made her bones ache. She sat in her dark cell, staring at the chains that held her. Her wrists were sore, but her mind was sharp, her heart beating faster than it had in years. She remembered the words she overheard from the Baron's captain. For one night, the fortress would not have its strongest guards. For one night, the Baron would be away. It was the chance she had waited 13 years for. Her fingers shook as she pulled at the chains. The iron was old. Rust had eaten its strength. She pressed her thin arms against the wall and twisted until the pain tore through her muscles. The chain gave a groan, a sound like it had not been touched in ages. She bit her lip hard so she would not scream. Finally, with one desperate pull, the shackle around her right wrist snapped. The metal cut her skin and blood dripped, but she was free on one side. Her left wrist followed soon after, leaving her trembling but unchained. For the first time in 13 years, her hands were her own. She crept to the cell door. The lock was old and rusty, and she had stolen a small shard of bone weeks ago, hiding it under her ragged clothes. With shaking hands, she forced the shard into the lock and turned it again and again. The sound was louder than she wanted, each click echoing like thunder in her ears. Any moment, a guard could appear. Sweat slid down her face as she prayed the lock would break. Then, suddenly, it gave way with a soft snap. The heavy door opened a crack. Her chest filled with fear and fire all at once. She pushed the door slowly, every breath shallow, her eyes wide in the dark corridor. The halls of the fortress were quiet, shadows stretching long. She knew this place well, every corner, every stone. She had been dragged down these corridors countless times, beaten and mocked. Tonight, she walked them as a ghost, moving barefoot, silent, her heart hammering like a drum. A guard's footsteps echoed down the hall. She pressed her back against the cold wall, her hands covering her mouth to silence her breath. The guard passed, yawning, not even looking her way. When his steps faded, she slipped into the next passage, moving low, almost crawling. Her body was weak, starved for years, but fear pushed her forward, stronger than hunger or pain. She found herself in the kitchen area, where rotten food lay scattered in pots. She grabbed a piece of bread, hard and stale, but it felt like life itself. She stuffed it into her mouth, chewing fast, tears burning her eyes. She had to keep moving. She slipped past the fire pit, past the bones of creatures eaten by the Baron's guests. Every shadow felt alive, every sound like danger. Then she heard it. The sound of voices, sharp and cruel. 2 guards were arguing at the gate. She crouched behind a barrel, her ears straining. They spoke of the Baron's orders, of hunting grounds, of who would be rewarded. She waited until they laughed and walked toward the drinking hall. Her chance was now. She ran, her bare feet slapping lightly against the cold floor, her breath ragged. She slipped into a narrow passage and found herself near the outer walls. Her hands shook as she pushed against the wooden door that led to the storage rooms. The smell of leather, oil, and iron filled her nose. Weapons lined the walls. She reached out, fingers brushing a dagger, but her strength failed. She could not fight. Not yet. She could only run. She grabbed a cloak instead, pulling it over her ragged body, hiding her thin frame. It smelled of dust, but it would keep her hidden. She stepped into the open night, the air sharp and cold on her skin. Her eyes widened at the stars above. 13 years since she had seen them, and now they burned bright, mocking her and guiding her at the same time. She wanted to cry, but there was no time. Alarms rang suddenly, loud horns shaking the air. The guards had discovered the broken chains. Her heart leapt into her throat. She ran across the barren yard, her legs weak but desperate. Arrows whistled past her, guards shouting, lights flashing in the darkness. She pushed herself faster, stumbling over stones, cutting her feet, but she did not stop. She slipped into a dry drainage tunnel at the edge of the fortress, crawling on her knees through the filth. The stench of rot filled her nose, but it was better than chains. Behind her, the voices grew louder. The guards had seen her trail, shouting to each other, sending dogs into the tunnels. She crawled faster, her hands scraping against the rough stone, blood mixing with dirt. She could hear the dogs barking, closer, closer. Her chest burned, every breath tearing at her lungs. But she kept moving, dragging her broken body forward, whispering to herself, "Not tonight, not tonight." The tunnel opened into the wasteland outside the fortress. She fell out onto the dirt, gasping for air, her body shaking with exhaustion. The night was wide, endless, and terrifying. She had escaped the fortress, but the world outside was no safer. Behind her, the horns still roared. The Baron's hunters would not rest until she was caught. She pulled herself to her feet, her cloak dragging in the dust. Every step was pain, every muscle screamed, but she forced herself forward. She could not stop. If she stopped, they would drag her back, and 13 years would turn into forever. She looked at the stars one more time, their cold light burning into her eyes, and whispered through her cracked lips, "I am free." The wasteland stretched before her, dark and deadly. The fortress loomed behind, filled with soldiers who wanted her back in chains. Her body was broken, but her spirit burned. She knew the chase had only begun. The wasteland was endless. The ground was dry and cracked, sharp rocks cutting into her bare feet as she stumbled forward. The wind carried dust that stung her eyes and filled her mouth with bitterness. She had thought freedom would feel lighter, but it was heavy, heavier than chains. Behind her, the horns of the fortress still echoed in the distance. Somewhere out there, hunters had already begun their search. The Baron would not forgive her escape. He would spend his wealth and power to drag her back. She pulled the rough cloak tighter around her thin body. Her skin was marked with cuts from the tunnel, her throat dry, her stomach aching with hunger. Every step hurt, but she could not stop. If she stopped, she would hear the Baron's laughter again, feel the chains again. She had sworn never to return. Even if this wasteland killed her, at least it would not be in his hands. The night sky stretched wide above her. Stars sparkled cold and far away. She had not seen them in 13 years. For a moment, she slowed, staring up, almost forgetting the pain. But then she heard a sound that pulled her back to fear. A howl, sharp and long, cutting through the night air. It was not human. It was one of the beasts that lived in these lands, creatures trained to hunt. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs. She picked up her pace, limping across the broken ground. The wasteland was not empty. Strange plants twisted up from the dirt, their thorns glowing faintly with alien light. Some swayed as if alive, reaching toward her when she passed. Once she brushed against one, and the sting burned her arm like fire. She jerked away, biting her lip to stop herself from crying out. Even the plants were dangerous here. The Baron's hunters would use this place to their advantage. They knew the land. She did not. Hunger chewed at her insides. She had stolen only one piece of bread from the fortress, and it was already gone. Her mouth was dry, her lips cracked. She searched the ground for water, for anything, but found nothing. Her vision blurred, black spots floating in front of her eyes. She stumbled, fell to her knees, and pressed her hands against the earth. It was cold, lifeless, but she forced herself up again. She could not die here, not after surviving 13 years, not after breaking the chains. As she walked deeper into the wasteland, she found bones. Some belonged to beasts, some to soldiers, some even to humans. They lay scattered, white under the starlight, broken swords and helmets beside them. This land had seen battles, long forgotten. She bent down, her fingers brushing over a human skull. For a moment, she felt a connection, a reminder that she was not alone in her suffering. Others had fought, others had died here. She whispered softly, "I will not join you." Then she moved on. Her ears picked up the faint hum of machines. She turned and saw a light far away, scanning the ground. A hunting drone, circling like a predator bird. She dropped flat against the dirt, pressing her body into the cold earth. The beam of light passed just above her, sweeping across the wasteland. Her chest burned as she held her breath. The drone hovered, then moved on, its engine fading into the distance. She lay still for a moment, then dragged herself up again, every muscle screaming. The Baron's eyes were everywhere. Hours passed. She had no sense of time, only the endless stretch of land. Her feet bled, leaving a trail behind her. She knew the hunters could follow it. She tried to walk in jagged lines, stepping on rocks, covering her prints where she could. But she was too weak to be careful for long. Her only weapon was her will. She whispered to herself, over and over, one more step, one more. The howl came again, closer now. Her breath caught in her throat. Out of the darkness, two glowing eyes appeared, low to the ground, watching her. Then another pair, and another. The beasts had found her. They circled, their teeth gleaming in the starlight. She grabbed a rock, small and useless, but it was all she had. Her hands shook, her body weak, but she raised it anyway. The creatures growled, their muscles coiled to strike. Before they could, a sudden noise broke through the night. A loud crash, metal against stone, from somewhere beyond the ridge. The beasts turned their heads, distracted, and then scattered into the darkness. She stood frozen, her heart racing, clutching the rock in her bloody hand. She did not know what saved her. Maybe it was chance, maybe it was fate. Whatever it was, she did not waste time. She ran again, her legs moving even as her body screamed in pain. The wasteland stretched into hills, broken and jagged. She climbed with shaking arms, pulling herself up the rocks. From the top, she saw the land spread wide, endless shadows and glowing plants, the horizon stretching into forever. She felt very small, a single figure lost in a sea of darkness. But she also felt a strange strength. She had made it this far. She could make it further. Her body swayed as exhaustion pulled her down. She found a hollow under a rock and crawled inside, curling up in the dirt. The cloak wrapped around her, thin and torn, but it kept the wind away. Her eyes fluttered closed, though fear warned her not to sleep. She whispered again, soft and tired, "Not tonight. I will not be caught tonight." As she drifted into restless dreams, the wasteland around her came alive with sounds, howls, the whir of machines, the crack of shifting stone. The hunters were out there, searching. But she was still free. And as long as she could take one more step, she would remain free. She woke to the sound of footsteps. At first, she thought it was only her mind playing tricks, because she had dreamed of being chased the whole night. But then she heard it again, soft crunching on the dirt, steady, careful, too heavy to be an animal. Her body froze in the shallow hollow where she had hidden. Her heart began to pound so loud she thought whoever was walking would hear it. She pressed her back against the stone wall and tried to make herself small. The footsteps came closer. She peered through a crack between the rocks. A tall figure moved slowly across the wasteland, carrying something long in his hands. Her first thought was that the Baron's hunters had found her. Her blood ran cold, and she clawed at the dirt as if she could disappear into it. The figure stepped into the faint moonlight, and her eyes widened. The face was not alien. The skin was human. For the first time in 13 years, she was looking at a human being. Her body shook with fear and confusion. She did not know if he was friend or enemy. Humans were rare in these lands, most either killed or enslaved long ago. What if he worked for the Baron? What if he turned her in? Her instinct screamed to run, but her body was too weak. She tried to push herself up, but her legs gave out beneath her. A stone slipped under her hand and rolled, making a sharp noise. The man stopped at once. His head turned toward her hiding place. Her chest tightened as his eyes searched the rocks. She pressed herself down, wishing she could vanish, but it was too late. He stepped closer, his weapon raised, scanning the shadows. When his gaze landed on her, his expression changed from caution to shock. She saw his mouth part slightly, his eyes widening as if he could not believe what he was seeing. He lowered his weapon slowly, then crouched a few steps away from her. She tried to crawl backward, fear making her heart race. She whispered, "No, no." Her voice was weak, broken from years of silence. Her body collapsed again, too tired to fight or flee. The man raised a hand, palm open, showing he meant no harm. His voice was deep, steady, carrying no cruelty. "It's all right," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The sound of his words almost broke her. She had not heard kindness in so long that she could barely understand it. She stared at him with wide, hollow eyes, her lips trembling. Every part of her wanted to believe him, but every scar on her body warned her not to. Trust was dangerous. Trust meant pain. She shook her head weakly, trying to crawl further away. He did not move closer. He stayed where he was, crouched on the dirt, watching her carefully. His eyes were not filled with the cold hunger of the Baron's men. They were filled with something else, pity, maybe, or sadness. Slowly, he laid his weapon down on the ground beside him, pushing it away. "See?" he said quietly. "No threat." Her chest rose and fell in quick gasps. She did not understand why he would do that. No one gave up their weapon in the wastelands. It was death to be unarmed. Yet he had done it just to calm her. Something inside her shifted. She wanted to believe that not everyone was cruel, but fear still held her tight. Then her strength broke, her vision blurred, and she collapsed onto her side, too weak to hold herself up anymore. The man moved quickly then, kneeling beside her. She tried to push him away with shaking hands, but he caught her gently, not with force, but with care. His arms were warm, his grip steady. "You're safe now," he whispered. Her body trembled as he lifted her. She had not been held in kindness for 13 years. The feeling was strange, almost unbearable. She wanted to scream, to cry, to fight, but her body betrayed her. Her head fell against his chest, and she felt his heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. It was a sound she had almost forgotten humans carried. He wrapped the cloak tighter around her and began to walk. She could hear his boots crunching against the dirt, feel the rhythm of his steps. For a moment, she closed her eyes, unsure if this was real or just another cruel dream. In the past, the Baron had tricked her with illusions, making her believe in rescue only to laugh when she broke. Was this the same, or had fate finally shown her mercy? As he carried her through the wasteland, she whispered weakly, her voice almost gone. "Why? Why help me?" The man glanced down at her, his jaw tight, eyes looking out at the horizon. "Because no one deserves what they did to you," he answered. His tone carried weight, as if he spoke from his own pain. His words wrapped around her like fragile hope. She did not reply. Her body was too tired, her mind too broken to argue. She let herself be carried, though her heart still feared betrayal. But deep inside, something stirred. The touch of human arms, the sound of human words, the warmth of human kindness. It felt like a light had cracked open the darkness that had covered her for so long. The wasteland stretched on, dangerous and wide, but for the first time since she broke her chains, she did not feel completely alone. She did not know who this man was, what his story held, or whether she could trust him fully. But for now, she let herself rest against him. For now, she let the fire inside her burn a little brighter. For now, she let herself believe, just for a moment, that safety might be real. She woke to warmth. For a long time, she did not move, afraid it was only a dream. The ground under her was soft, not the rough stone of her cell or the sharp dirt of the wasteland. A blanket covered her thin body, rough but warm. The air smelled of firewood instead of rot. She opened her eyes slowly. She was inside a small shelter, the walls made from old metal sheets and stone, patched together with care. For a moment, she panicked. She sat up quickly, her hands searching for chains that were no longer there. Her breath came fast, her eyes wild. Then she saw him. The human sat by a fire, turning something over the flames. He looked at her calmly, as if he had been waiting for her to wake. The weapon he carried before rested against the wall, far from his hands. He did not move toward her. He only said in a steady voice, "You're safe here." She pressed herself back against the wall, clutching the blanket like a shield. Her body trembled. She remembered every trick the Baron had used, every false kindness before the pain. She could not trust so easily. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why help me?" The man looked at the fire for a moment before answering. "Because I know what it's like," he said. His voice was quiet, heavy. "I know what it's like to lose everything." She watched him, searching for lies in his eyes, but she saw only tiredness, the same kind that lived in her. His face carried scars, not just on the skin, but in the way he held himself, as if he carried weight too heavy for one man. Slowly, he tore a piece from what he was cooking and placed it on a small metal plate. He slid it across the ground toward her. "Eat," he said. The smell made her stomach twist painfully. Hunger roared inside her, but her mind screamed it was a trick. She stared at the food, her hands shaking. He did not push her. He only turned back to the fire, giving her space. Minutes passed before she reached out, her fingers trembling as they touched the plate. She lifted the piece to her mouth. The taste was plain, burnt at the edges, but it was food. Real food. She chewed quickly, tears running down her face before she could stop them. The man did not laugh at her tears. He did not mock her for eating like an animal. He only placed another piece of food near her and returned to his silence. She ate until her stomach ached, then curled up with the blanket, unable to stop crying. She hated herself for showing weakness, but she could not hold it back. Later, when the fire was lower, he spoke again. "The Baron," he said, his voice hardening, "took everything from me too. My wife, my son, my home. He burned it all. I swore I would fight him, but I was only one man, so I hid here, waiting, surviving." His jaw clenched, his fists tightening. "When I found you, I couldn't leave you. I couldn't let him have another life." She stared at him through the firelight. His words struck something deep inside her. For years she had believed she was alone in her suffering. But now, here was someone who understood, someone who had felt the same loss. She wanted to believe him, but part of her still feared this was another lie, another trap. Trust had been beaten out of her too many times. "Why risk yourself?" she asked quietly. "He will come for me." "He will come for you too." The man looked at her, his eyes steady. "Then let him come," he said. "I'm not afraid anymore." She turned her face away, her heart pounding. His words were strong, but she could not understand them. Fear had been her life for 13 years. How could anyone not be afraid? And yet, his voice had carried no trembling. For the first time, she thought maybe there was someone strong enough to face the Baron. That night, she lay on the blanket, staring at the roof of the shelter. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound outside made her flinch. The whistle of the wind, the creak of the walls, the distant howl of beasts. Each one felt like danger. But then she remembered the sound of his voice. She remembered his steady heartbeat when he carried her. And slowly, for the first time in years, her eyes closed without nightmares pulling her down. When she woke again, the man was outside, sharpening a blade. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the roof, warm on her skin. She pulled the blanket tighter and stepped out carefully. He looked up at her, gave a small nod, and went back to his work. She stood there, uncertain, feeling the weight of freedom pressing down on her. It was frightening, but it was also something she never thought she would feel again. Days passed in that shelter. She began to eat properly, her body gaining small pieces of strength. She watched the man work, fixing tools, hunting for food, preparing defenses. He never asked her to serve him, never raised his voice. When she tried to help, he only guided her gently. Slowly, her suspicion began to weaken. She started to see him not as a threat, but as a shield, maybe even a friend. Still, the fear never left completely. At night, when the fire burned low, she would whisper to herself, reminding herself not to trust too deeply. The Baron was still out there, and his hunters would come. She could feel it in her bones. Yet when she looked across the fire at the human, sitting quietly with his weapon at his side, she allowed herself a small piece of hope. She did not know what the future held. She did not know if safety was real. But for now, in that fragile refuge, she felt something she had thought was gone forever. She felt human again. And that feeling, no matter how small, gave her the strength to face tomorrow. The first sign came at dawn, a low humming in the distance, carried by the wind across the wasteland. She was sitting near the shelter's entrance, wrapped in the cloak he had given her, when she heard it. Her body stiffened, every muscle tensing. She knew that sound. It was the Baron's machines, the ones he used to sweep the land for runaways. Her heart began to race, her stomach twisting with fear. The man stepped outside, already holding his weapon. His face was calm, but his eyes scanned the horizon with sharp focus. "They're looking for you," he said quietly. She lowered her head, shame burning through her chest. She had brought danger to his door. "I should leave," she whispered. "If I go, maybe they won't find you." He shook his head. "If you go alone, you won't last an hour. The Baron doesn't stop. He won't rest until he has you back." His voice was steady, but there was a hard edge to it. "We'll fight if we have to. But first, we plan." Inside the shelter, he spread out a rough map on the table. It was old, drawn by hand, showing the wastelands, the fortress, and beyond it the border where human-controlled land began. "If we can reach here," he pointed to a mark scratched into the map, "we'll be safe. The Baron's reach doesn't extend past this line, but it won't be easy." She leaned closer, her eyes scanning the lines, though her mind was clouded with fear. "He'll send soldiers," she said softly. "Hunters. Drones. He always does." Her voice trembled, remembering the countless times she had seen others caught and dragged back, their cries echoing in her memory. "Yes," the man replied, "and that's why we don't wait here for them to come. We leave tonight." Her eyes widened. The thought of running again made her stomach twist. She had only just found a place where she could sleep without chains. But deep down, she knew he was right. If they stayed, the Baron's hunters would surround the shelter, and then it would be over. That day was filled with tense preparation. The man packed supplies: food, water, a few weapons, blankets. She tried to help, though her hands still trembled with weakness. He showed her how to tie small bundles, how to balance weight for travel. She listened carefully, storing every instruction in her mind. For the first time in years, someone was teaching her instead of punishing her. It felt strange, almost unreal. When the sun began to fall, he handed her a small blade. Her hands shook as she took it, staring at the dull metal. She had not held a weapon since before her capture. The weight of it in her palm made her chest tighten. "I can't," she whispered. "I don't know if I can use this." His gaze was firm but kind. "You don't need to fight like a soldier. Just remember, if someone tries to take you, you fight to breathe. You fight for one more step. That's all." She nodded slowly, his words burning into her. Fight to breathe. Fight for one more step. When night came, they slipped into the wasteland, moving quickly but carefully. The air was colder, sharper, filled with the distant hum of machines. She walked close behind him, every sound in the dark making her heart leap. At times she wanted to stop, to curl into the dirt and hide, but his steady steps pulled her forward. He did not speak much, only motioned with his hand when it was time to crouch or move faster. She followed, trusting him more with every step. Then, as the moon rose high, the sound of boots echoed across the rocks. She froze, her body rigid. In the distance, figures moved, shadows with glowing eyes, the Baron's hunters. Their voices carried through the night, harsh and cruel, calling out to each other as they searched. Her breath caught, panic threatening to take her. The man touched her shoulder, grounding her. "Stay low," he whispered. His calmness cut through her fear like a knife. Together, they slid behind a ridge, pressing into the shadows as the hunters passed nearby. She could see their armor glinting in the moonlight, hear the sharp growl of their beasts. Her heart hammered, but she did not move, not even when one of the beasts sniffed the air close to where she hid. The man's hand tightened on his weapon, ready to strike if they were discovered. After what felt like hours, the hunters moved on, their voices fading into the distance. She let out a breath she had been holding so long her chest ached. Her body shook, but the man gave her a nod. "You did well," he said quietly. The simple praise filled her with a warmth she had not felt in years. But their struggle was far from over. As they moved on, the sound of a drone rose above them. A beam of light cut across the rocks, searching. They sprinted into a narrow canyon, the man pulling her along. The drone's hum grew louder, closer. She stumbled, her foot catching on a stone, and she fell hard to the ground. Pain shot through her leg. The light swung toward them. The man didn't hesitate. He turned, aimed his weapon, and a shot cracked through the night, striking the drone. It sparked and spun out of control, crashing into the rocks with a fiery explosion. The noise echoed for miles. The Baron's hunters would know where they were now. Her chest heaved as she struggled back to her feet. He steadied her with a strong hand. "No more hiding," he said. "They'll come fast. We have to move quicker." She wanted to collapse, to give up. But when she looked at him, standing tall even against the danger, she found strength. He was risking everything for her, and she could not let that be wasted. She clenched the blade in her hand, forcing her legs to move. Step by step, breath by breath, they pushed deeper into the wasteland together. Every shadow felt dangerous, every sound like a trap, but she was no longer running alone. The Baron's hunt had begun, but so had her fight for freedom. And this time, she was not only surviving, she was choosing to live. The night burned with fire. The Baron's soldiers came like a storm, their weapons flashing in the dark, their shouts echoing across the barren land. She and the human had barely made it past the canyon when the first wave struck. Explosions lit up the rocks, scattering dust into the air. Her heart pounded as she clutched the small blade he had given her. The fear she thought she had buried came roaring back, threatening to break her. The human stood tall, his weapon in hand, his eyes sharp and unshaken. He fired into the darkness, each shot steady and precise. His voice cut through the chaos. "Stay close to me," he shouted. She stumbled behind him, her body trembling, but her feet moved. She refused to be frozen anymore. For 13 years she had been helpless, but tonight she would not bow. The soldiers closed in. Their armor gleamed in the firelight, their voices cruel. "She belongs to the Baron," one of them yelled. Her blood went cold at the sound of that name. The man raised his weapon higher, his jaw tight. "Not anymore," he growled, and unleashed a burst of fire that sent 2 soldiers crashing to the ground. But more came. They poured over the rocks like shadows surrounding them. She felt her throat close with panic. The human turned to her, his voice low and urgent even in the chaos. "If they take me down, don't stop. Run. Don't ever let them take you." Tears filled her eyes, but she shook her head. "No, I won't leave you." There was no time to argue. A beast lunged from the side, its jaws wide, eyes glowing with hunger. She screamed and swung her blade without thinking. The edge cut across its snout, not deep but enough to make it howl and fall back. Her hands shook as she stared at the blood on the knife. For the first time, she had struck back. The human gave her the quickest glance, a spark of pride in his eyes, before firing again. The battle grew fiercer. Fire lit the sky, smoke choking the air. She coughed, her lungs burning, her ears ringing from the blasts. Yet she stayed beside him, refusing to fall behind. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, each movement strong and sure, protecting her with every breath. Then, through the smoke, she saw him, the Baron himself. Tall, armored, his eyes glowing with cruel fire. His voice carried across the battlefield, cold and sharp. "You think you can take what is mine?" he thundered. His gaze landed on her, and for a moment she was back in her cell, a broken girl trembling under his shadow. Her knees almost buckled, but the human stepped in front of her, his body a shield. "She is not yours," he said firmly. The words struck her like a spark, igniting something deep inside her chest. For years she had prayed for someone, anyone, to say those words. Now they were real. The Baron moved forward, his blade glowing with deadly energy. He swung at the human, who blocked with his weapon, the clash sending sparks into the night. The ground shook with the force of their fight. She could only watch, frozen, as the two battled, one with the cruelty of power, the other with the fire of defiance. The Baron was stronger. Each strike pushed the human back, his body straining to hold against the weight. Blood dripped from his arm where the blade had grazed him, but he did not fall. He fought on, his eyes locked on the Baron's. "You've destroyed enough lives," he spat. "It ends tonight." The Baron laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "One human against me? You will break like all the rest." He raised his weapon high for a killing blow. She felt something snap inside her. She could not watch him die. She would not go back to chains. With a cry that tore from her soul, she charged forward, the small blade clutched tight. She drove it into the Baron's side, just below his armor. The Baron roared, stumbling from the unexpected strike. The human seized the moment. With one final, desperate strike, he drove his weapon through the Baron's chest. The alien lord's cry echoed through the wasteland as he fell, his body crashing into the dirt. Silence followed. The soldiers froze, their eyes wide, their leader fallen. Some turned and fled into the darkness. Others stood stunned, their courage broken without the Baron's shadow behind them. Slowly, one by one, they scattered, leaving only the fire and smoke behind. Her chest heaved as she dropped the blade, her hands covered in blood. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she fell to the ground, shaking uncontrollably. She could barely breathe, barely believe what had happened. The Baron was dead. After 13 years of terror, the monster who had stolen her life was gone. The human knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. His face was tired, bruised, bloodied, but his eyes were calm. "It's over," he said softly. She looked at him through tears, her lips trembling. "Am I really free?" she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest. "Yes," he said firmly, "you're free." The words broke her completely. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed, the years of pain pouring out of her in one flood. His arms were strong around her, warm and safe. She clung to him as if he were the only thing keeping her alive. In truth, he was. As the fire burned low and the night grew quiet again, she felt a strange peace settle over her. For the first time in 13 years, the chains were gone, not only from her wrists, but from her soul. She was no longer a prisoner. She was no longer the Baron's property. She was simply herself. And in the arms of the human who had fought for her, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would never be alone again.